Hey guys, so today I'm going to review how to use Google Sheets to calculate mean and standard deviation. I'm going to be using the class data for our potato osmosis lab to demonstrate it. So here we have the different lab groups, so I just gave them letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and then here we have their values. So this would be the percent change for the potato cores that they put into distilled water at 0.2 osmoles per liter, or the moles of sucrose per liter, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, and 1. And so for each group, they put in their percent change. So they took the final minus the initial over initial times 100. So that was the final mass of the potato core minus the initial mass of the potato core. So that's the difference, divided by the initial mass times 100. That's how you get these values here. And you can see that for this one right here, we've got kind of an outlier. We have a group that had 3.5 as their percent change. So looking at their 0.2, I think maybe they had some sort of issue with either their solution was mislabeled or there was something wrong with the potato core. But that value is included here, so I would actually expect a really big standard deviation. But we're going to get the average of all of these to see overall what the change was. So I don't really need the mean of all of their samples going this way because that wouldn't give me useful information. What I want is my average or the mean of all of the potato cores that were put into the distilled water. All of the potato cores put into the 0.2 and so on. And so it's pretty easy to do in Sheets. There's a few different ways to go about it. You can click over here in the corner. There's this FX, that's insert function. You can also come up here to insert and then go down to function. An average comes up, so you can just click on that average and see how it gives you an option of what you want it to average. So I'm going to select the data that I want it to average for me and then just hit enter. And it calculates average for me. So here I'm going to do that again. I'll use the little f of x button over here. If it decides it wants to work for me, maybe not. So again, so you could see that it's insert, function, average, and I'm just going to select the data that I want it to insert. And notice here it has the cell, so it has C2 to C9. So that's what it's going to average for me. Another really easy way to do this is once I've done that for my first row, if I find this little box on the corner and I pull it across, it's smart. It knows that I want it to do that same function, but instead of doing it for C2 to C9, here I want it to do it for D2 to D9 and E2 to E9. So it figures out that's what I'm trying to do. So here now I have my mean or average values at each concentration. Now I want to determine the standard deviation. So the average gives me an idea of overall what the percent change is. But the standard deviation is going to add a little bit of information to that. It's going to let me know what the spread about the mean is. So the mean gives me an overall idea of the percent change, but the standard deviation is going to tell me how spread out the data is around that mean. Are all the values really close to the mean? If so, I would expect a small standard deviation. If all of the values are spread out or there's some outliers there, I would expect a larger standard deviation. So again, with this 3.5 over here, I'm probably going to expect a higher standard deviation for these values than maybe for these ones over here where they all seem pretty close together, or here where they all seem relatively close together. So here's the same idea. I'm going to go to insert function. Now it's a statistical function. I could also just search for it. So it should be STDEV. Let's see. There we go. And I just want regular standard deviation. And here I'm going to select the data that I want. So I'm going to select here to here. Now be really careful. You don't want to include your average in your standard deviation calculation. You want it to calculate standard deviation for your actual measured value. So don't get too crazy when you're selecting data. And there you go, I've got my standard deviation calculated. I can grab this little box and slide it over, and it will give me standard deviation for all of these. So you'll notice that my standard deviation for the distilled water and for the 1 molar solution, those standard deviations are pretty high. And so I know that my data has been spread out about the mean. So it's a pretty large range. And so I may not be as confident in those results. However, here, for my 0.2 and 0.4, I have a relatively small standard deviation, or a smaller standard deviation. So that's how you calculate the mean and standard deviation using Google Sheets. I'll have another video on how to graph this data coming up.